Hello and welcome to the Bigger, Braver Life Show. I'm your host, Angela Marie Williams. As an entrepreneur and success coach, my mission is to empower you to realize your dreams and potential through transformational experiences. The purpose of this show is to inspire your positive change by learning from a community of those paving the way to a bigger, braver life. Welcome everyone to episode 7. My name is Angela Williams. I am a therapist turned coach, and I'm so excited to have my guest here today. Her name is Audra Coons, and we're going to hear all about how she's living her bigger, braver life and helping other people do that too. Welcome, Audra.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for being with me on the show today. So if you could give us a brief introduction, tell us what you're working on, what you're all about.
Yes, of course. My name is Audra Coons. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am a women's empowerment therapist. I specialize in helping women really transform their relationship with food and body, and also really themselves to really learn and accept themselves. I really believe that as women, we have the ability to make a greater impact on the world and a greater impact in the people in our lives. And I think in order for us to do that, we've got to start with ourselves and make sure we're good there first. I have an online counseling practice, and I see people one-on-one, as well as I'm excited to be launching a group program that I'm sure I can talk a little bit more about later.
Yes, wonderful. So very exciting. So Audra and we met at UCF, right? We met at school.
Yes.
And we were both social work students together at the same time. And she just brings such a wonderful light. And we've kind of had conversations, here and there over time, just about what we're doing, how our work has evolved, and our passion for empowering women and really setting them up for success. So tell us a little bit more about what got you excited to do the work. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned, we were in graduate school then, and really, I got involved in psychology and just really in my high school. It was my senior year of high school when I was exposed to that, and I just fell in love with learning about us as humans and how we interact and behave, and certainly really just personal growth has always been a big value of mine, and it's I can't get enough of it. And so just from there, I was went for it. And so then got my bachelor's in psychology, and then, was in the social work program. And that's really when I went on my own personal journey of figuring out, right, we're talking about all these things. And I think it's really important that we are doing that for ourselves, and we have to be able to help other people. So that's really when my journey started, and has really just evolved over time and continues to do that. So yeah, I would say really college is when things started for me.
Yeah. So what does living a bigger, braver life mean to you?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. I'm grateful that you have this show and that you have this movement, right, to live a bigger, braver life, because it really does take bravery to grow and to work towards our personal goals. And I think that's something, if I reflect and look back, I have always pushed myself out of my comfort zone, pushed myself a little bit beyond to what, right, it's not totally comfortable, and but it's that next step. And that's how I have evolved in anything that I've done in my life. And so it really is that step of just putting yourself out there and continuing to grow. And it's scary, but we can do it. So
yes, I love that. You're right. And for me, I really look at those times when I wish I would have made a different choice. And it was typically the regrets, if you will call them that, those things that you look back and wish you'd have done differently. For me, it's always been something that I was afraid. I was afraid to do the thing, and I didn't do it. So whether that was speaking out, or it was saying no, or setting a boundary, or, whatever that was, actions big or small, it was, looking back and saying, wow, I wish I would have pushed myself out of that comfort zone. So I really highly value that courage and that action. I guess, some of that may be bravery, or acting on that even though we're scared, it doesn't mean you don't have to be scared to do something brave, right? It's doing it in spite of being scared or being afraid. So yeah,
Mhm.
it does take that strength to push yourself out of that comfort zone and really improve and grow and saying, oh, there's something going on with me. I need help, right? Like that takes courage. That takes a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, if you would like having to admit, oh, it's that pushing you out of your comfort zone, and that like that might not be the answer we want to hear, and that oh man, like it feels hard. But when I really am I'm honest with myself, like that is what I've done consistently, which has got
Yes.
me to where I am, and I'm sure will continue to get me where I'm going, even though
Yes.
that's what now feels scary and the other stuff feels familiar at this
Yeah, that's a really
point.
great point. Yes, because I think a lot of the people, that I work with and are surrounding in the community and everything, it's fear that holds us back from a lot. And we come up with these, justifications or rationalizations of why we need to stay playing small or, not going after a big dream or the thing that we want to do. But really it's actually taking that brave action and stretching yourself outside that comfort zone is what is going to get you that success to where you want to go. So it's like taking that risk. And while it is scary, it has paid off. So tell us about the risks you've taken or how you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone.
Sure. I mean, I think that this is one of them right here, like a little risk of right getting online and talking publicly about what I care about or what the work that I'm doing is vulnerable, right? And so this is one example. And I think, I'm from the Midwest, very small town, very down to earth, friendly, simple life. And moving to Florida, moving to, just even going to college or, out of state university when I was in grad school. And then essentially moving to Florida now. I mean, I live in Tampa, this is city.
Yeah.
Nothing what I was used to. And just, being able to have new experiences is what has always kind of motivated that and seeing the world. But that was all out of my comfort zone to some level.
Yeah. And honestly, we share that background. I'm also from the Midwest. I'm from Michigan. And, I kind of talk about that. Moving was something that maybe wasn't really the thing that a lot of people did, kind of back during when I did that. And so it was like moving by myself and, it was
Mhm.
scary, but it was like you get that scared feeling, but also that excitement. And so that kind of propels you forward, right, to go after these adventures and these new exciting things. We do share a lot of similarities in that way. So that's why I love hearing how you continue to bring that bravery in and live that life that you want to live.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even just to talk a little bit about the work I'm doing, I'm primarily working with women who are ready to, transform their relationship with food, stop fighting with it, stop fighting with themselves about their bodies, things like that. And that takes courage and takes effort into making those reflections and those things, but it's totally worth it. And that also just talking a little bit about my personal journey started in college. I mean, I went through my own experiences with food and having disordered eating and really just that perfectionism piece that I have to be perfect or eat, trying to eat perfectly and it doesn't serve us well. And so going through that own experience myself and then, really it was something I wanted to do for others, but at the same time, it's something I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be that person who has that thing, that problem, and then does it for, other people where it's totally kind of backwards in that the mindset, like everyone has their own personal journey or something they're connected to, and then if you're able to grow in yourself, you want to share that with other people. It's kind of naturally evolved into this. And then I started working in therapy, doing therapy in different positions, not specifically with eating disorders and body image and things. And it's just a naturally evolved to that. Like I started helping women with it, seeing the results. I'm like, how can I not do
Yeah.
this? How
Yeah.
can I not share this? Because there's so many people who are in need of
Yeah.
the information.
Absolutely. And you touch on some of those beliefs that we have to be perfect. And I think, that's one of the things I talk about a lot with women is, I think we're socialized to be perfect, to be, small and quiet and pretty and all these things, right? That again, that's not who we are. Like we can be those things, but it like puts us in this like unrealistic box, and it doesn't feel good. And so then that really kind of can spiral and really cause us to have this really negative and unhelpful self-talk that can really, drag us down and impact our behavior,
Yeah.
in so many ways. So tell us about an example of a client success story, or, something that you were able to see a transformation through, and how to apply some of those principles.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times, women are coming to me, they've likely been dealing with this for some time. Some may have had treatment in the past, but I often see women who maybe have been dealing with this in silence or on their own. And so they're, able to function, and they're usually, doing well in other areas, but this is really dragging them down. And they're likely either dieting, trying to really manipulate what they're eating or limiting what they're eating, really to, right, change their bodies or to be, again, that mold that in society we're told we need to be. So what tends to come up is, right, they're thinking about food, or they're having anxiety around food constantly, right? Or they are maybe not able to engage in their social interactions. They want to go out with their friends or their partner or whatever, and they're not able to be present and enjoy the experience because there's all this backlog about what's okay to eat, what's not okay, and what is this, those type of things. And so really the mindset, and I'm so glad you brought up self-talk. That's a huge piece of it, is how are we talking to ourselves? And also, how are we talking ourselves through what's happening? So we all have a food story. We all have a story about how our beliefs form, right? About ourselves, or maybe specifically about food and eating. And so really looking at some of those, but relearning a healthy way of approaching food and unlearning some of the things that we may have picked up along the way from society or different experiences we've had.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the work that you're doing is to understand the story and to bring it to a place where, we can kind of clear the clutter, so to speak, on the unhelpful parts of that, and to
Mhm.
really transform it into something that's going to be healthy and beneficial and really full of self-love, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen, women be able to transform to where they're able to enjoy food. They're also able to nourish their bodies, to for health and to, be their best, where it's not the whole picture, right? Because if we're able to move beyond some of the things with that, then they can get on to more, maybe other personal growth things that they want, or more other goals that they have in their lives that they want to focus on and spend their time on that.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing your own story, you having your own story with food, and kind of going through that journey
Mhm.
yourself. And what do you think it was that maybe held you back from, or took you a while to kind of share this with other people?
Oh my gosh. Well, initially, just, I mean, I think when I think way back when, like the shame that how could I ever do this, or how could I ever use food in that manner, or just, right, it's very shameful. And so even being able to talk about it, I mean, if you would have asked me, several years ago if I would be sitting here with you doing this, I'd probably be like, no.
Right.
But so knowing that there, a lot of people struggle with this, and also the reasons behind it, which is super empowering. And that's the part I like to bring in when we have the information, that it's not just me or something, it's really, there are some specific things we can look at that helps us view things differently. I think for me, I I got to a point, and I think a lot of women I see, like, they're, when they come to me, like, they're tired of this affecting their lives, and they're
Right.
ready for it to be, like, this can't continue the way that it's going,
Right.
right? And that's kind of the motivation of, like, I got to do something different.
Right. Right. We actually talked about that in the previous episode too. It's like almost like we get to a point where we're like burned out, or exhausted or like desperate for this change. And then it's like, we have to make this change. But it's almost like, why do we wait that long? We can do this before and save ourselves, some of that time. But that's kind of just how, our brains work sometimes. Realizing that it's like, there's always, wherever you are in your journey, there's always support or growth or somebody there that's going to be able to help you. And I really like what you said about being able to share the story and have other people know that they're not alone. And I know in therapy, we do a lot of normalizing for people that this is not just happening to you. You are not alone. There's such power in community to know, that I'm not the only one, therefore I don't feel so alone and isolated, and others hopefully know a little bit more about how to navigate this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think that our society, I mean, it's, there are a lot. I mean, if we look around and we talk with other people, a lot of people are really can get caught up in, again, those societal pressures. And one of those is certainly weight stigmas that we see, or things about looking a certain way or whatever that is. That's a big piece of it. So even just, I think that comes back to reflecting when we're caught up in that, we're very much looking out externally, right? Of what do other people want me to do, or what are other people doing? And until we reflect inside of, well, what do I need? What's working for me? How am I gonna to grow? I mean, that's where the answers are. And so certainly that's a dynamic, or a piece of the work that I do too, is reflecting on, well, what is it, knowing yourself and even learning about yourself to know, what do I need?
Right. And that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because when we are externally focused, where is the joy going to come from? Because we're still saying no to ourselves when we're saying yes, or we're abiding by other people's rules, or, the bullshit rules, especially, we're just really not serving ourselves. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And that's actually one of the principles of my Braver program too, is, it's how do we acquaint and adore, is what I call it, ourselves, right? It's like, how do we get to know, and how do we love ourselves to that point where we want to make the change now? We don't want to wait for it to get any further. How do we tune in and bravely say, I'm going to do what I want to freaking do, and you guys can suck it? You know what I mean? Like, that's the goal, right? To be secure of yourself in that way.
Yeah. And that's hard to do. And I think all of this comes in layers, and evolving. When I think even about my journey with food or accepting my body, I mean, it was in layers of, I was maybe working on things throughout where, okay, I got through that. And then, another one, another layer of that. And I think that's with anything, when we look bigger picture outside of food and body issues, is that as long as we're alive, we're always growing, right? We always have the opportunity to grow and change. And so there's going to be layers of growth.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point too. I have a lot of clients, that I think maybe more so in the therapy space, but they're kind of like, okay, like, hello, we've been working on this for, a couple of months. Like, where's the change? So you're right. I mean, the layers happen in such a way that it might take a little bit more time than we think. It's not just going to happen, overnight most of the time, right? So being able to look at those wins and look at the growth, no matter how big or small, look at the progress. That's so important too, to help us kind of motivate to continue to go forward. And change is happening. It just might be smaller than we expect or want at the time.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. So true. And just as you were talking, that made me circle back to, you had brought up self-talk, and how we're talking ourselves through that. That can also really change how we're feeling, but also how we're doing in any transformation or any growth process. Is if we're not acknowledging or recognizing the small changes we're making, we're probably going to be down on ourselves, and that's going to halt the change, right? So that self-talk, to empower ourselves and notice what we have done, is so important.
So important. I agree. Do you have some examples, maybe for those who might be kind of struggling with some eating or struggling to love their body? Do you have some guidance on the self-talk specifically for those issues?
Sure. There's so many things I could say with self-talk, but I think just focusing on looking at, how am I viewing food? What are my beliefs about food and my body? So recognizing what that is, because if it's something where maybe I'm really viewing things as there's only good or bad, maybe I'm putting things in labels,
Right.
it's not allowing us to see that all foods have some value, right? I mean, we all need food to survive and live. And so when we start manipulating that or changing that, it really affects us psychologically, physically, emotionally, all those things. But really starting with what are my views and how am I thinking about food? Where did that come from? It is certainly one starting point. But another one I think even more important is, am I sick and tired of doing this and I'm ready to do something different? And that's usually changing from some type of really restricted diet or very regimented way of eating. And so if you have maybe some very specific rules that I'm only able to eat at certain times, or I'm only able to eat a certain amount and really limiting it to that, that's one thing we would look at first,
Mhm.
if that helps explain a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, again, whatever journey you're on, it's always helpful to look at that origin story of that unhelpful thought process or behavior.
Mhm.
What is the story that I'm telling myself? Is it that I'm not good enough? Is it that I have to be different? Is it that I can't love myself the way that I am? And where did this come from? And how can we change that? And what do you prefer to believe? What do you want to believe?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think with that, right, then giving some information and some other ways of viewing food, in that even one small example is that sometimes women will come in and they only eat to nourish, or they only eat for what's going to be healthy, and they are not enjoying food at all.
Yeah.
There's no enjoyment factor at all. And so that's, just recognizing that food is there for our nourishment and to fuel us, and it's also there to enjoy. And if we think about food and how we use that, I mean, we do that in celebrations for birthdays, we do that in celebration of holidays, gatherings, funerals, right? In every emotional space or connection to people, food is involved,
Yeah.
right? So just being able to expand or shift the way we might be thinking about it is certainly one aspect of the work that I would do with clients.
Yeah, and that's, pretty much, I would argue, we could argue, one of the most important ways. In your experience, Audra, what do you see as the relationship between trauma and disordered eating?
Sure, that's definitely, I mean, we know from research that there is that correlation there. And, traumas come in many forms and many levels of impacting. And so, even someone who may initially think, oh, I don't have trauma, maybe they don't view themselves as having a trauma history,
Mhm.
there's likely some things, right? We might all be able to reflect on something that was a traumatic or impactful experience.
Mhm.
So I guess what I'm saying with that, we know there's a correlation to that, where even someone who might initially be like, oh, nothing traumatic's happened to me,
Right.
they've likely had some things that are impacting and playing a role in whatever problem it is that they're experiencing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've seen that relationship in the therapy clients that I worked with too. Typically, from my experience, there had been some, more early childhood trauma, and that's how it was manifesting present day, was this needing to kind of control or, shape the way that they eat or look or things of that nature. So yeah, it can be very layered there too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of thinking about like what a mind fuck it is that, right? Like there's also that society piece where we're like ashamed of how we look, but then we try to manipulate the food as like one of those pieces. And then we are ashamed of talking about that and dealing with that, right? It's just like the shame cycle. Like this is so wild, right?
Right. And that just makes me think of another point of when we think about respecting and accepting our bodies. But a big part of this usually is, how am I moving my body? How am I exercising? Because often, if we're having some concerns with food or body image, we've been manipulating that in a way where exercise becomes this thing that has to be done, that's very forceful or not enjoyable, instead of something that rejuvenates us or makes us feel good or meets
Right.
us where we're at. And so that's something with exercising. maybe one day, yeah, I want a really, high intense spin class, but another day, that's not what I want. And I want to walk, or I want a yoga class, whether that's a gentle or one that's a little bit more intense.
Mhm.
And knowing how we move our bodies can also serve us for what we're needing in that moment. And it really isn't an exchange for what we had to eat that day.
Yeah, yeah. And I like how you said, there's many layers and there's many facets here with disordered eating in particular, right? We've got maybe some setups with trauma, some or impactful events, stories that we've told ourselves, and the societal pieces that play a role. And also, disordered eating is kind of acting as that almost like that protective mechanism of how can I control, and this behavior kind of comes out. And then there's this shame cycle, right? It's like there's so many nuances to this. And I'm so glad that you're doing this work because holy moly, it's so needed.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's part of it too. I mean, I think I spoke earlier on the gap of there are, this is affecting all all ages, all genders, all, and I primarily work with women and also ethnic backgrounds too. And so the idea that it's only looks a certain way or only something specific
Right.
is simply not true. And I think going back to that gap, and some people may have gone through treatment, or that this is something that they have had support, but there is a big population of people, I think, and women who might be experiencing this where they haven't, you know, ended up going to treatment or having that, or maybe that's not even what they need because that's a higher level, but they are needing support, information, guidance, and how to navigate these things.
Absolutely. And what would you say to anyone who maybe is concerned or wants to change their relationship with food or the way that they view their body? What would you say to them right now?
Yeah. I would want to remind them, like, you, again, right? And this sounds maybe a little cliche, but you're not alone.
Right.
And we know how to overcome this. We know how the tools and things that we need so that this isn't a problem anymore. And so even thinking about, I could live and this not be the problem, this would not be a concern for me,
Yeah.
it's possible and it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. And I feel honored to be able to give a space for women to come in and to go through this process and cheer them on, right? Cheer them
Yeah.
on when they're succeeding, and
Yeah.
support them when things feel tough.
Yeah, and again, thank you for sharing all of this. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about kind of the ways that people can work with you and or maybe other therapists, depending on where they are in the world.
Yeah, sure. I think I mentioned I'm in Florida, so I am able to work with anyone in the state of Florida. And I offer one-on-one counseling sessions via video. So one-on-one is an option. And I also am launching a new program. It's called Feel Good with Food. And it is a 12-week program specifically designed for women who are ready to make this transformation and really, make peace with food once and for all. And so that program is starting in February. And so if people are interested, they can go to my website. It's audracoons.com. And there will be a free class where people can come in, get a little bit more information, and see what it might be like if they were to join that program. So that is coming up in just a few weeks in February. So I hope everyone will check it out.
Yes, thank you so much. That's wonderful. And thinking about back to you when you were nervous to share your experiences or your stories, and maybe we've got some other folks who maybe they have a calling on their heart to share or to help others with this or to even help themselves with this. Is there anything else you want to share with them?
Yeah. Go at your own pace. And again, I think this speaks to, looking inward and knowing yourself of what's going to work for me, and not getting caught up in what everybody else is doing, because knowing when I'm ready, how to pace myself, and when to approach things is important. And so, and I'm kind of a gal who likes to take her time. I
Yeah.
usually think through some things, before acting, sometimes too much. But and so go at your own pace and get support. Get somebody
Yes.
who has some expertise, who is able to support you, and do it. Do it.
Yeah, do it. Go for it. And I love
Go
that.
for it.
Yeah, I love that. It's really about, again, getting that permission from yourself to take that action that you need, to get the support that you need, to look and listen inward of, what is it that I need right now? What is it that I can benefit from? How can I move forward with the best path going further, the best path in mind? And
We got to get out of our own way, right?
yeah, that's really true. I know that that's used a lot, I think, too, but it's the truth of the matter.
Mhm.
And I think when there's that comparison and that external noise, and that's another thing I talk about in my program too, is when we listen to all of that external noise, it's really hard to tune into our own messages that our system, our brain, our body are sending us. Those are the most important messages to listen to. And if you need help discerning what's anxiety or what perfectionism versus what is my true, higher self calling me to do, that's
Mhm.
where, again, Audra is going to be a really great resource. And I love that we talked about how this growth can happen in layers. So maybe your first stop is Audra. Maybe your next step is a coach, right? Maybe it's chatting with me after to continue that and go after your bigger, braver life. So it's really helpful. I actually was tuning into another entrepreneur's messaging, and he was sharing, I think some of the millionaires that he's interviewed have all said, go to therapy. If you are a business owner or doing some things that are really serving folks, like go to therapy, clear your stuff, do your homework, heal, and that will make you really a better business owner, leader, whatever that may be.
Yeah, for sure. We can all do our own personal growth work. We all have things that we can reflect on, and really it's totally acceptable, right? We need a therapist, a coach. Like I know between the two of us, like, having coaching support and things is super important. And we don't need to shame ourselves for that. That's what's gonna help us succeed.
Yes, absolutely. And really coming out better on the other side of that. So, it might be scary to start and do and commit to and be vulnerable and be seen by somebody else, but you really do gain so much more than not going through that process.
I thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful just to have the opportunity to be a voice and
Yeah.
share more, and hopefully other women will hear this and feel inspired or some empowerment.
Yes, perfect. So thank you so much, Audra, for being here. And you would like folks to reach out to you via your website?
Yes, yeah. If you go on my website, you can either register for the free live class, or you can also book a consult. Reach out to me. There's a few different ways, but it's everything will be there. And then also just knowing that you do support folks outside of Florida needing a resource or kind of a support for that. The Alliance for Eating Disorder Awareness does have a lot of information and resources where people can find a provider local to them, or maybe even join in on a group if that's, because there's virtual as well as different areas. So that's the Alliance for Eating Disorder Awareness.com is another resource.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we'll put all of that in the show notes too, so people can have great access to that. So again, wherever you are on your journey, we wish you the best. Feel free to reach out to Audra, reach out to me, whatever you need, we're here for you. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Bigger Braver Life Show, and we will catch you in the next episode.